Hello arters, artists, and art appreciators, and welcome to Arter of Lore. Today we're going to be working on this here NaNaNas surprise mini doll that I found at Goodwill a little while ago. She apparently originally came with a backpack and her name is Tuesday Meow. When she came to me, Tuesday was suffering from a messy lip filler and lipstick job, including having some rips in the fabric, and she only had this little sweatshirt thing on. Typically, you can repaint the face of dolls, but hers will obviously require some more significant effort and a fabric replacement. I couldn't actually find any videos of someone even attempting a fabric face-up of these NaNaNas dolls, so I was flying entirely blind. If you don't know much about NaNaNas, you might not be familiar with how they're constructed. They have fabric on the outside, but they aren't stuffed. Instead, this is actually a vinyl doll covered in like a layer of fabric. There are seams on the back of the legs and the arms, sides, and the head. You can't remove the paint with acetone, and I couldn't paint over it even if I wanted to due to the damage done to the fabric. To remove the face fabric, I'll first have to take off her hair and hat. All of these littler NaNaNas dolls have hats, and instead of rooting the hair into the vinyl, like most dolls, the wefts of hair are sewn to the hat, so all the mini NaNaNas have permanent hats. This probably helps save on hair cost and also covers up the uglier part on the back of the head that we'll get to in a minute. I couldn't find my seam ripper, so I just carefully snipped as many stitches as possible from the hat, and then the head skin. The back is more complex than I thought, with the front faceplate connected to two pieces that are stitched together and a few hand stitches to close it all up. That's the ugly part that I was talking about. The fabric on the head wasn't as stretchy as I expected. I kind of thought these NaNaNas dolls were made using stretchy fabric, but it seems pretty form-fitting. I also found this little foam faceplate under the layer of fabric, and the fabric was kind of like glued to it. The head itself, once I removed all of that, was like a sticky vinyl. It smelled very unpleasant and like sulfur-y. I don't know, I didn't really like it. I thought it would be white because I saw that in a Reddit post for people who had peeled their NaNaNas teen and customized it like fabricless. But instead the vinyl on this one is like a peach skin tone. But then on top of that, the face foam was white and the fabric itself also was white. It's like the skin tone is printed on top, only on one side. So I don't know why the vinyl is a peach tone underneath if they were just gonna like add white stuff on top. I don't know, it's like very strange to me. Anyways, my immediate thought was to use a nylon stocking to cover the head after removing the existing fabric so that I wouldn't have to order like a special fabric. I also didn't know how it was constructed when I made up this plan. I figured testing would be good for people as like a cheap and easy option anyways, and I have some other ideas for how I could do this in the future in like a neater and more factory accurate way. Go over those later in the video. For now, the goal is just to sort of mimic the appearance of the texture of fabric on the original doll, but not necessarily the feel or like the exact fabric type. I did paint over the head vinyl in just like a white gesso, or I think I dyed it a little colored gesso. Since like I said, it smelled kind of weird and it was sticky. I tried going with a lighter color in the hopes that it would lighten up the nylon, which is why I only did one layer, but that was probably not the best idea because like I said, the nylon's thin, so it just adds like weird contrast. But this is all about experimenting, so that's fine. The nylon stockings I had didn't actually quite fit the color of the body, even when I did some testing and attempted to lighten them with like pastels. I can't say this worked that well. I recommend trying this with like a white stocking and then darkening it with pastels or watered down acrylics or alcohol markers, or just finding like a more matching color. One of my other NaNaNas actually has darker skin and I think would match this stocking color, so like, I mean, depending on what you're going for, you can just choose any color. I mean, I guess I could have also dyed the rest of the body a darker color to match in theory. But anyways, the stocking also has quite large holes when you stretch it over the top of the fabric, so I would go with like 2 layers of matching fabric, ideally. I ended up going with only one. After cutting the sock to just fit over the head, I glued the pieces of the sock underneath the head to like the chin, and kind of tried to tuck them into the neck hole. And then the pieces on top I sewed closed, like I sewed the hole closed. I wanted to leave the option open to take the hair and hat off, so I wanted to give her like ears, like human ears. I just tried to glue 2 tiny pieces of half circular fabric together to make an ear shape. But when I turned it inside out, they ended up kind of like pointy and uneven. And this probably would have worked better if I had sewed them. I ended up sewing them to the head and adding stars on her ears, like little earrings, to just cover up the unevenness. Don't look at them too hard. They're also kind of like a different color and texture than the rest of the head. Probably could have thought through that a little bit better, but that's fine. The main issue with repainting the NaNaNas dolls is the repaint part. Painting fabric is never going to get the same quality as machine printing it, but that's pretty much the normal issue with like repaints, is that it's very hard to replicate factory printing with like your paintbrush. So as long as you can accept some differences and appreciate like the hand making process and result, I think that's fine. Like, I'm okay with it looking different, a little different. Obviously, I'm still trying to match that like fabric-y texture and the like vibe, but it's okay if it looks a little different. The bigger issue is that you can't really erase when you're painting with acrylics on fabric. I get pretty much one shot at this, and if I make like a big mistake, I might have to strip the entirety of the fabric off the face and start again. It's basically freehanding the entire face, and you can't even use pencil to plan out what you want to do. I planned out the materials and face design before I started this project. Materials as in the medium that I was going to use. I had this empty milk bottle, and I stretched the nylon stockings that I was going to use over the top of it and painted some like test faces. I did this even before I was certain I would do the face up because I wasn't sure it would even work. I'm using mostly acrylic paint and then also this Micron brush pen in brown ink. This isn't necessary, but the pen was just easier to use than like watered down acrylic paint. That was my like quote unquote pencil, and I used it to like make the sketch. I also tried some alcohol marker in my test designs. I think, like I said, with the right alcohol markers and white nylon, you might just be able to dye the skin with the markers, or like with fabric markers. And then you could also do the same thing with like alcohol inks. I don't know how permanent any of this would be, although, you know, these dolls are for display. I think you kind of accept that when you're hand painting a doll, and doing like a face up, it's not going to be played with by a child, hopefully. Just know that if you do draw with markers, or like I did, like the Micron pen on it, you might damage like the pen tip or the marker tip and something like that. You know, generally you shouldn't be using them on fabric. I mean, I have a lot of alcohol markers and a lot of pens. So for me, this was worth it for doing this project. My best tip for painting on fabric like this is to push the paint into it with the back of a brush or some other like little rounded object. You don't want the paint to be lying flat on the surface, which creates like the wrong texture. You want it to kind of go in the holes, especially if you're using like a thin fabric like I did, where you want it to go all the way to the surface beneath it. That's why I suggest using 2 layers of fabric, and then you should push the paint into the second layer. So that it kind of goes all the way through. This is especially true for the white paint, which needs a lot of thin layers to become like really clear. Just remember overall, it's much harder to lighten fabric than it is to darken it. I saw this little run in the fabric relatively early on, and I kept poking at it, but it made it worse. I could have just restarted the entire thing, but I decided to leave it, especially since if I made any other mistake, I would have to restart anyways. Spoiler alert, it's still there, so that's just something you'll have to deal with if you have nylon stockings. I mean, the run didn't happen from anything that I did to the face. Like, I honestly don't know how it got there and how I didn't notice it until I had already, like, gotten so far into this process. But yeah, just be careful with nylon stockings. I used some pastels for the cheeks and nose, but I probably could have used alcohol markers. Those are kind of optional. I mean, they're like subtle. They might rub off because I haven't sealed this with anything. I will say that in my testing stages, I actually did use a matte sealant to seal the nylon stockings, and it seemed to work okay. I didn't like mess with it too much, but it did change the texture of the fabric, but so does the paint, and it didn't change the visual texture of the fabric, just like the fabric if you felt it. So if you have a matte sealant, you could theoretically, like a spray-on sealant, I wouldn't do a painted sealant on this at all. But yeah, I think with this kind of face-up, you just have to accept that it's a little bit more delicate than other types of face-up because of the fabric. Okay, even though I said I can't really erase on fabric, I will admit that I did mess up a little bit on the eyelashes for one of the eyes, and I did mix a shade of paint to cover it up that like kind of matched her eyes. It's only in one spot, and in the end it gets mostly covered by her bangs, so I don't think it's too distracting. But yeah, you have to be pretty cautious about the eyelashes because they, you know, have to be reasonably thin. That's actually why I went with this sort of, it's supposed to be like a shoujo manga style eye with some thicker lashes, so I don't have to worry about trying to make them all really skinny. I accidentally got some glitter on the face while I was just doing things. And I decided that it fit, so I just, since I can't add like a gloss to the eyes, I decided to add a bit of sparkle so it would make them nice and shiny, and I think it actually really brought it together. Oh, by the way, if you can't tell with these eyes, they are not matching the sculpt underneath. There's like very little sculpt on the NaNaNas dolls anyways, but I just kind of like went for it. I didn't worry about like what was underneath the face plate. They do look kind of weird from the side, but these dolls are so cartoonified in the first place, and their eye mold is so faint that you can kind of go nuts with like what you do with the eyes. So yeah, this face-up did a number on my back with all the leaning over, but it was actually like pretty straightforward. A little easier than I thought, except for the stress of freehanding. But anyways, let's move on to some other odds and ends. Felt like this video would be incomplete if I just faced her up. So I'll just be adding like new shoes and clothes to her repertoire. I mean, she doesn't have shoes anyway, so she needed shoes, and then I figured I'd try to design her clothes while I was at it. First though, like I said, I wanted her hat to be removable, which means I need to give her something on her head to cover up the ugly fabric. But I'm also not taking the hair off her hat, and just putting it on the head. I figured she just has short hair, like really short hair, and she wears a wig for fun. I don't know, people do that sometimes, and it will give her options in the future if I find enough hair to make like a full head of hair wig, so that she can swap out between like a different wig and like her wig with the hat and stuff. I just like the idea of, I just like having options for the dolls. So that's why I'm making her a whole outfit, but I don't know if all of it's necessary. I cut up some yarn into tiny pieces to make homemade flocking, added a touch of glue to the head, and slapped it on there. I didn't use fabric glue or anything, so it got everywhere and it was not holding on that well, and also the scalp was showing through. I solved this by slapping some watered down black acrylic paint on it, and just, you know, kind of trying to fill in the spots with more glue and stuff. And in the end, I think it stopped shedding particles eventually, and I vacuumed them up. And it looks alright. She looks very, I guess, like masculine. I don't know, I did consider that maybe this character is like goes by like he, him pronouns sometimes. Maybe is bi gender, likes to take his/her little wig off. I don't know. You can come up with any headcanon you want. Maybe she's just like a little bit butch sometimes, and then she sometimes wears her really feminine hat. Whatever. I think it adds some nice like variety to her design. I drew a sketch of my idea for the outfit for her. I mostly just wanted her to have the new shoes, but, you know, outfit, whatever reason. I wanted to use supplies I already had. That was the only rule. The shoes themselves are just a couple layers of cardboard for the sole and then the heel, and they have like some thick paper around it to neaten them up. It just like makes them a little neater. The shoes are felt with glitter, and yes, that's how I got the glitter on her eyes, because I was working on the shoes. I probably should have just sculpted the soles also. And then the little shoelaces are embroidery thread that I very cautiously sewed through the sides of the shoe in like a real shoelace pattern so that she could have proper little shoelaces. They stay on her feet just fine because, you know, it's felt on fabric, so it's like kind of grippy. And I think they look just fine. They don't look anything like the shoes she like originally came with, like in the original kit, but that's fine because she's a custom doll, so. I don't really know how to make shorts. In the original drawing, I had made this off-the-shoulder shirt But then in practice, I realized this made no sense because the doll doesn't really have shoulders. Again, a weird body type to make clothes for. So you can't really tell that it's supposed to be like off the shoulder. It just looks like it's a really badly made shirt. So instead I just made her a little tank top, and that's what goes under her sweater. Her normal sweater. I don't know why I needed to make something just to put it underneath the sweater that she already has, but I did it, so she has a full outfit. The last tiny details were the bracelets that are printed onto her arms. They're just printed in the normal doll, so I decided to make them into separate objects. I will probably glue them on since they have trouble staying put in the exact correct place that they need to be to cover up the printed versions. Project preview. So since this is a shorter video, I tucked this here at the end before the reveal, and I'll make it quick. Basically, while working on this doll, I've been slowly chipping away at the bunny project, which I did get 3D printed, although I'm not nearly done. I got sidelined, I had like a week-long vacation, and then there was a second pony-related project that I started last week that has to do with like silicone molds and resin and complicated stuff. So one of those will be my next big project. The bunny also requires resin for her eyes, so that's kind of why I was thinking about how to do resin things. So I might move up the pony experiment so that I can learn more about resin casting before moving on to the other big project. So I don't know. I tend to do things, you know, kind of all at once. Anyways, please like the video if you like this video, or if you didn't, just like it either way. If you're interested in seeing me try more small projects in between large ones also, please let me know. I have like a lot of damaged and dirty dolls and ponies and Littlest Pet Shop that I could like customize and clean. I felt like a face-up alone wasn't long enough for a video, which is why I made the clothes extra in this. I don't know if I could do like maybe multiple ponies or multiple Littlest Pet Shop in like one video, or I've been thinking of like sewing some pony clothes, or like I don't know if it would just be enough to just customize one. I just feel like I have so much and I should do all of them. Reveal time! Overall, I think she turned out pretty cute for my first repaint. This is the first time I've actually repainted a doll. I do have some old dolls that I've been meaning to repaint that are like really old, years old, but I never ended up repainting them. So it's my first repaint, my first NaNaNas fabric repaint. She does look a little startled and or sad at all times, but I've gotten so attached to her big anime eyes that I don't want to change them. In certain lighting, you can tell her fabric is a bit too thin and dark for her skin tone and that there's like a lighter layer underneath, but I took the photos in natural light and you like can't really tell, or they don't look like drastically off. Her face is definitely darker, like I said, but I don't know, maybe she just like tans more in her face and she keeps the rest of herself covered up at all times. I don't know her life. I was kind of lazy with gluing the fabric under the head since I honestly thought I might have to redo it. So just like don't look under there that closely. I think that if you just sewed a similar shape to the original face plate, you could get a much neater result. You probably don't even have to remove the head when replacing the fabric, just tuck it into the neck hole, which I did my best to do. I'll probably put her in her normal sweater, wig, handmade shoes, and her little shorts that I made her to display. The wig is placed a little higher on her now so that you can see her ears and eyebrows, and I didn't attach it with anything, but I might attach it with like a pin. So for anyone looking to customize a NaNaNas doll, I think buying custom fabric and resewing a face in the same way as the original would probably look the neatest. You just need a fabric in a similar sized texture and sort of stretchiness. You probably should pick the fabric in person to confirm color and texture, especially if you're doing it with only needing to change the face and not the rest of the doll. You want to match the skin tone. I think the dolls are polyester, and the only fabrics I've seen on Amazon with like close-up views of the texture that match the NaNaNas dolls are also polyester fabric, so it's probably going to be that if you're looking for a matching fabric. You would probably just trace the pattern from the head from the pieces of your own doll, but remember the back of the head is not neat and then you'll need some sort of fabric glue to exactly mold the fabric to the foam faceplate if you use that. It may be possible to modify the foam faceplate or even just tuck something under the fabric to get a certain appearance. For example, it might be interesting to sculpt more defined lips and a nose out of foam clay, or even like a dog muzzle or a cat nose, and then just kind of tuck that underneath the fabric and make sure the fabric is very firmly stuck in place. The easiest way is probably close to how I did it here. Just use some nylon stockings, paint, and glue. I think that's the minimum amount of stuff that you need. It's definitely not the most perfect method, but I think it works pretty well as like a display piece, and she's pretty cute. Clearly the person who had this doll before wanted to customize her, and it looked like someone had tried to give her bigger lips and then regretted their choice and tried to remove the lips. So I do feel kind of sorry for that person who, you know, probably a kid who got their little doll messed up and was hoping to clean it off but couldn't. But, you know, the good thing is that she has gotten a face-up. She's gotten like a redemption. And if you have any NaNaNas dolls that have ripped faces, then you can try something similar to this. I would like to try reskinning the entire body of one of these dolls at some point. Although I don't really want to sacrifice the other ones I have. Maybe the boy, I don't love how he looks, but I'd prefer to sacrifice dolls that are already damaged in some way. But that'll be a video for another time. Okay, goodbye. Like the video, subscribe to my channel. Oh, and also, come up with a name. Her name was like Tuesday Meow. Maybe we could call her Wednesday Purr. She's definitely got Wednesday Adam vibes. But yeah. I feel like she needs like a little bit of a different name now that she's like a different little character. Okay, like, subscribe, bye-bye.